Hello and welcome to the latest edition of PlayStation All-Stars Battle... Wait, no, that's not right, hang on. Here we go, here's the right script. Hello friends and welcome to another edition of Why It's Rad, and also simultaneously welcome to another edition of Why It's Bad, and oh boy am I going to get in trouble for this one. A while ago I made a big series detailing the references and origins of various elements of a game called PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. It was basically Sony's answer to Super Smash Bros. And initially I was super on board. I mean, I made a whole series of videos on it, so that's probably quite obvious. But while PlayStation All-Stars has had a lot of great potential, it failed to live up to it, and my excitement and enthusiasm for the game has waned over the years. Its absence from my top 100 games of the 2010s was notable, and yet two actual Smash Bros. Games ended up on the countdown, one of them right there in the top 5. So what happened there? Why did my interest in PlayStation All-Stars wane over the course of 8 years, while my interest in Smash Bros. Has never been higher? And that's what I'll be looking at today as I pit the two games against each other. I'll be picking out 6 reasons for each game, contrasting each other on various aspects. For Smash Bros. I'll be explaining why it's rad and why I've racked up, 340 hours on it. For PlayStation All-Stars I will be explaining where it let itself down and failed to keep me interested all these years later. Please note that I'm not deriding the series that I previously did, nor am I trying to diminish my genuine interest and excitement at the time of the game's release, but this is more to explain why I've come to realise why I was more in love with the idea of PlayStation All-Stars and less in love with the actual product. And please bear with me if you are into my prior series and are shocked by this video. It'll all make sense as we go along. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is an absurdity. Its character roster spans the vast years of Nintendo's history and throws in some extra additions for good measure. There are currently 79 characters representing 35 franchises, and quite frankly that's a silly amount. There's an 80th character on the way representing yet another franchise. But it's great. Chances are, no matter what your tastes, there is at least one character in there that resonates with you. And with the inclusion of the likes of Solid Snake and Persona 5's Joker, Cloud Strife, Terry Bogard, and the Street Fighter characters, you don't even really need to be much of a Nintendo fan either. It's unlikely we'll see a gaming crossover this big or exciting ever again. Sure, there's some filler here and there, but it's such a vast and all-encompassing roster that you can kind of forgive them a few strays. So I don't expect PlayStation All-Stars to quite reach Ultimate's heights, not least because the most recent Smash at the time of its release was Brawl. But still, they can hit some staples, right? Sony have got some major franchises, and the PlayStation brand has attached itself so thoroughly to some third-party franchises that it'd be absurd to leave them out. Hit those beats and the people will dance. It is that simple. And they didn't. Oh sure, we have some of the first-party staples. You got God of War, you got Uncharted, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, Little Big Planet, even the likes of Parappa and Ape Escape represented. But really, how excited was anyone to play Noriko from Heavenly Sword? Or what about the title character from that huge, enduring hit, Fat Princess? Did you want 2 Cole McGraths? Of course you don't, but here they are anyway. And the third-party choices are not what people were expecting. Crash Bandicoot? Solid Snake, Cloud Strife, Lara Croft. Now forget them, here's Raiden using a moveset that hadn't yet been in a game, and here's Devil May Cry's Dante, but not the one you want. And how about Big Daddy and Isaac Clarke, those beloved PlayStation characters? Wait, why are you walking away? Let's be honest here, it was a minimal roster which felt like mostly filler. And unlike Smash Bros. Where you can pretend Dr. Mario doesn't exist and still have an absurd number of characters to pick from, once you drop some of the lesser characters from the roster, you're not really left with much at all. And that's a shame. Part of the enduring appeal of Smash Bros. For the last 20 years has been its casual simplicity, which hides some surprising complexity for those willing to dig deep into its systems. Ultimate has done a lot to keep the core Smash Bros. Experience as tight and snappy as it's ever been. Okay, more technical players have debates about the merits of the game's intricacies, and there will probably always be divides on that front. But to the average player, it just feels good to play. But the reason why so many people can get into Smash Bros. Is because it's such an easy game to understand. You have 2 attack buttons and a control stick, and you knock your opponents off the stage. It's simple, it's effective, it takes seconds to explain. You don't have to remember long combo strings like a traditional fighter either. It's simple and it's elegant and it's just fun. And it's a big part of the reason I've stuck with the series all these years. It's just so fun to jump into and mess around with. It's something I don't really get with more traditional fighting games and their more technical systems that I continue to struggle with. PlayStation All-Stars was always going to attract Smash Bros. Comparisons. It is quite literally characters from a platform holder's stable beating each other up. You couldn't get more obvious comparisons if you tried, so they needed to distinguish themselves from Nintendo's game with some unique mechanics of their own. After all, there are plenty of Smash clones out there, and not one of them is particularly worth engaging with. So doing something different could help. And so, smashing opponents off the stage is out, and super attacks are in. The central battle mechanic of PlayStation All-Stars is less simple and elegant. You see, characters have these special attacks that they can build up with a meter, and you have to get combos out onto your opponents to build up the bar, and then the supers have to be used to gain kills to win. Questionable use of the term kills instead of KOs aside, this is a much less welcoming concept than just hit people off the stage, and it's also one that works better on paper than in practice. The problem with this system is that it just takes up so much time to build up meter, and if you screw up hitting someone with your super, then you just wasted a bunch of time and now you gotta do it all again. Absolutely, I commend the developers Superbot for trying their best to differentiate here, but it's a fairly unwieldy system that ultimately put a lot of people off the game on the lead up to its release. The game often feels torn between being a casual Smash-style party fighter and a hardcore traditional fighter. Both of these aspects of its identity clash against each other. A little more time on the drawing board to get a refined system in place could have worked wonders. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a game that oozes style from every pore. The zooms for attacks set to smash someone out, anime-style cut-ins when final smashes are unleashed, flashy post-victory scenes, a graphic design bonanza in the menus. Every aspect of Smash Bros. Has been cultivated to just get you hyped to fire a rocket launcher into Pikachu's face as Solid Snake. But it's not just the game itself. Its announcement trailers are always a joy to behold, with CGI scenes built specially, the right level of meticulously crafted build-up, and always knowing just how to make a character look good as they're revealed. Nintendo also know how to tease and reveal appropriately too, as evidenced by Isabelle's reveal, which was tied into the initial announcement of Animal Crossing New Horizons, leading to speculation about which announcement it was going to be, only to turn out to be both. It's art, quite frankly. Oh no, PlayStation All-Stars, what are you doing? Why is this your aesthetic? No, this is all wrong, no! Yeah, you can immediately see the problem here. PlayStation All-Stars, in contrast, is stale. Its menus look like they were knocked together in basic image software, the title screen is a static image of a random character, while some generic pattern floats by behind them. Further menus just look drab and lifeless, with a clinical aesthetic that looks like a placeholder for the programmers to work with before the real graphics were added. And then they never were. In matches, things aren't much better. Matches don't quite feel as exciting as Smash Bros. Everything looks like it just needs that little bit of extra time to get polished, and its meshing of styles can sometimes clash in uncomfortable ways, and yes, I'm looking at you, Franzia. The trailers are also no better, as the character reveals are just the same background, where a character plays one of their intros and their name pops up on screen in the same bland text as everything else, and that's it. No one's really highlighted. It just looks unfinished, which, based on rumours I've heard, it was. And that's not helping its already lackluster roster and off-putting gameplay mechanics. In presentation, music also plays a significant part, and in a series representing a quite frankly absurd number of franchises, many of which have memorable and beloved soundtracks, I expect a good soundtrack for this, and good God does Smash Ultimate deliver. As with the roster though, I don't expect other games to go this far, but damn, Smash Bros. Goes above and beyond. Every franchise gets a wide array of beloved tracks either ripped directly from their games or remixed by some of the finest composers and arrangers in the business. What other game has Yoko Shimomura, Yuzo Koshiro, Koji Kondo, Michiru Yamane, Junsen Ue, Michiko Naruke, and even Grant Kirkhope all contributing music together? Hell, Nobuo Uematsu got in on the act via Brawl since he composed that game's theme, and oh man, Final Fantasy's in this too, so surely his music's gotten the star treatment and oh. Well, I guess we can't win them all. But just like the roster, if you can think of a favourite piece of music from one of the represented franchises, Final Fantasy VII notwithstanding, chances are it's in there somewhere, along with quite a few other surprises. I didn't even know I wanted a salsa version of the Wii Shop channel, but there it is, and I'm jamming to that wondrous nonsense. Admittedly, PlayStation franchises aren't as renowned for their music as Nintendo's, but that's not to say they're bad, they just generally try and fulfill a different aim. Nintendo make bouncy happy tunes meant to loop over more traditional gameplay styles, while Sony lean more cinematic, with dynamic soundtracks meant to flow and blend into each other. And while they're not as immediately catchy, they are often still excellent once you've delved into them. So how did PlayStation All-Stars choose to represent this? By leaving most of the game's original music on the cutting floor for original, vaguely similar pieces, and by making the remixes of tracks they did use as bland as humanly possible. Don't believe me? I counted how many music tracks representing the PlayStation franchises are in PlayStation All-Stars. Looking at the stage themes, of which there are 32 if we bring in the mashup tracks, 12 of these are original creations. Little Big Planet's melodic and lovely soundtrack, Abe Escape's memorable and bouncy drum and bass, Parappa's iconic nonsense hip-hop, and even the centrally important Patapon and Loco Roco sing-songs are all jettisoned in favour of mediocre soundalikes. And you'd think with a focus on Metal Gear Rising over Solid that we'd get at least some big over-the-top rock from that soundtrack, but where we should be screaming, instead we get this lifeless MIDI nonsense. Many of the remixes of the tracks we do get are also often little more than the original soundtrack file with a vague trap beat tossed onto them. The Heavenly Sword remix from Fearless is a notable exception as that elevates the original immensely, but everything else feels like the laziest thing in existence. A glorious fast-paced reorchestration of Nate's theme would have been astounding, but instead we got some weak synths plopped on top of the original. And while Metropolis and Blackrock Stadium's basic themes are brilliant, that's almost entirely down to the original tracks being excellent rather than anything PlayStation All-Stars did. There's also a ton of repetition in the music choices. Nate's theme from Uncharted isn't just a stage theme, it's also both of Nathan Drake's victory themes. Both Coles have their level 3 themes repeated in their victories, and the title music from the 2012 Twisted Metal appears everywhere. And then of course there's the characters with no stage representation, who almost all have generic soundalikes for their themes, and to do dirty to my girl cat like that is upsetting. Have you heard Gravity Rush's soundtrack? It's amazing, and yet here it isn't. Worst of all, it doesn't even make sense from a licensing aspect. European and Japanese titles are largely left without proper music representation, except for the cases where they haven't been left without that. Some cases could be attributed to external musicians with contract issues, except for when Buckethead and Nitin Sawhney show up just fine. And some franchises which do have proper music in one place have soundalikes in another, like Ratchet & Clank or Jak and Daxter. It's another aspect that feeds into PlayStation All-Stars feeling kind of cheap and unfinished, and shows the importance of really nailing your soundtrack. Outside of the actual fighting experience, Smash Bros. Has a lot to unlock. There are many modes and challenges that make it the kind of game someone could spend 340 hours playing or something. At the centre of much of it is the Spirit system. Spirits aren't admittedly the most exciting thing in the world at first glance because they're mainly just JPEGs from popular franchise promo art, but behind that there's potential for stat boosting and special match changes, and entire modes built around the concept of fighting spirits. And I actually really love the spirit battles. They're an unusual idea where existing characters and stages are modified in fun ways to make it seem like you're battling even more characters. Celeste from Animal Crossing, represented by a bow-wearing Jigglypuff who keeps falling asleep. Yusuke from Persona 5, represented by Chrom, a sword-wielding blue-haired boy with the same voice actor. Fatal Frame representation with Yuri from Maiden of Blackwater appearing frequently as an assist trophy while you battle Zelda on Luigi's Mansion. But there's so much of this stuff too. When spirits were announced they sounded like a cop-out, a way to avoid making individual models for trophies, but the reality is the spirits with these battles feel like more work, and yet in a more rewarding way that allows for a lot of playfulness and greater representation for the franchises. I genuinely love this system in Smash Ultimate, and I'm really glad it was implemented. In PlayStation All-Stars, one of the key collectibles are minions, who are, oh god, why is that a thing? Yeah, these chibi monstrosities exist to cheer on the fighters from the sidelines and give the franchises a little bit more representation, I think. Except for the fact that they're incredibly ugly. They're like Funko Pops, right down to them just not working for certain characters who clash with the chibi style. Most of the God of War gods look weird, while a Gravity Rush Nevi is just off in every possible way. They also just don't do anything. They show up in intros and outros, and that's entirely it. They're on screen for barely a second most of the time, and when they are, their presence is easily overlooked. What are they for? What we've seen so far hopefully has highlighted the differences between these games, but the simple question is, what led to these differences? For Super Smash Bros. As a series, it's been consistently directed by Kirby creator and all-around nice chap, Masahiro Sakurai. Sakurai's been with Nintendo for a very long time, and created Smash Bros. On a whim, and managed to convince Miyamoto it was worth doing. And clearly it was, because it's on its 5th title, in its 2nd round of DLC. Sakurai's a massive gaming nerd, and this becomes more and more apparent the more we see of him. His enthusiasm and excitement for showing off Joker and especially Terry when they were announced speaks to a love of gaming as a hobby, as well as his career. The deep dive knowledge of SNK games in Terry's showcase, the excitement of showing off Dragon Quest representation, and Famitsu columns where he talked at length about just how brilliant Persona 5 is, it all paints a very clear picture of why Smash Ultimate became such a grand celebration of video games as a whole. Because its director loves video games, and he wants to share this love and won't accept anything less. He and his team go to great lengths to make sure fans of each franchise are suitably satisfied with how their favourites are represented. Even when I was initially indifferent to Terry's announcement due to an unfamiliarity with SNK's work, Sakurai's excited presentation made me recognise just why the character was there and why he deserved to be there. Sakurai is a man who understands his own game's central appeal intimately. He knows all the in-jokes and the memes that get shared around by the fans, and he just gets that fandom love for each game he drops into the fray. Regardless of your feelings on how Ultimate plays, it's hard to deny just how much love and attention has gone into it. And that's why it's so rad. So as we've seen, PlayStation All-Stars has many flaws, and much of it can boil down to one central premise: the corporate heads at Sony Worldwide Studios. To make it clear, I'm not going to sit here and pretend the team at Superbot didn't care about their work. I have no doubt they did deeply care about what they were doing. As I understand it, they were the ones who approached Sony with the concept in the first place, and each team member had a dream roster that looked like many of those held by the disappointed prospective fans. But like many things in this world, it had the life crushed out of it by corporate interests. Sony have honestly always had a bit of a wonky time connecting with fans in the way Nintendo tends to do. Their more recent State of Play presentations speak to this quite heavily. I've heard tell, and this is all hearsay and speculation to be honest, that PlayStation All-Stars was doomed from the start. Sony were willing to sign off on it, but wanted to stay hands-off, leaving the inexperienced new team at Superbot to go out and secure massive characters on their own. Without Sony's clout, this is probably a big part of the reason a lot of characters were left out, because honestly, you try approaching Activision and asking them to use Crash Bandicoot in something without the help of another big corporation. Go on, I'll wait. There is this whiff of corporate rush job about the whole thing. The game's presentation feels like the result of rushing the game out to meet a holiday 2012 release date, and the limited music choices and limp trailers feel like a small developer trying desperately to fill in gaps in budget and legal troubles. The roster is further indication of this problem. The filler nature of the roster feels like the result of Sony viewing the game as a marketing tool rather than a celebration of their own history. Out of the full 24 character roster, no less than 18 of the characters are from franchises with releases from 2011 to 2013. That means 75% of these characters appear to be there to represent games that had been recently released, were released around the same time, or were close to wrapping up development. Only Jak and Daxter, Parappa the Rapper, Spike, Sedan, Toro, and Noriko were not in games from that time frame, and even then Noriko felt like she was there because of Dante due to a shared developer. This is most notable in the DLC choices. While Gravity Rush was certainly a beloved title for the 10 people who owned a Vita, Kat's inclusion did feel a little bit like a promotion for her game and subsequently the console. No one was requesting Emmett Graves, but Starhawk was selling poorly, so let's throw him in to drum up some interest, I guess. And the second round of DLC was released at basically the same time as God of War Ascension and Dead Space 3, and you better believe people noticed the connection. That's not to say Smash Bros. Is immune from this. Splatoon was a brand new franchise Nintendo wanted to give more airtime to. Hero from Dragon Quest seemed to be added to coincide with the Switch release of Dragon Quest XI, and Byleth, well, we all know how people feel about Byleth. But it's hard to be mad. Splatoon and Dragon Quest were heavily requested anyway, and more surprise character choices like the Castlevania duo softened that blow considerably. PlayStation All-Stars could have gotten away with some of its more questionable inclusions if the likes of Crash Bandicoot or Cloud had been thrown in as well. But with the focus on marketing over fan service, that just didn't happen, although, ironically, there would be marketing angles for both of these characters if the game was to be made now. And that, my friends, is why it's ultimately bad. Do you know what? No, that's not fair. PlayStation also had a lot of things wrong with it, but with the right time frame, a more experienced team, and a greater amount of support from Sony, a PlayStation-based Smash Bros. Type game could work. The characters were generally well represented in terms of movesets, and the mashup concept, where two franchises collided in the stages, had some legs. But a series of corporate decisions led PlayStation All-Stars to be a disappointment on almost all counts. And next to Smash Ultimate partying away and proclaiming everyone is here, it's easy to look back on Sony's attempt and think, This deserved much better. A sequel that learned from all of these mistakes could be excellent, but due to the general failure of the original, I don't see Sony ever wanting to learn those lessons and would rather just move on. In conclusion, games made with love and enthusiasm are often glorious, while corporate decisions can ruin the fun of everything. It's a lesson for life, I feel.
Colors weave into a spire of flame. Distant sparks call to a past still unnamed. Bear this torch again.